Hello, lords and ladies. It's good to see you. You'll note that I'm not in my usual author gear. It's not a Monday, and therefore I'm not talking about my book. Well, I'm not talking about my fictional book. I am, however, going to talk about some medieval stuff. So, we're going to talk today about Beating the Heat medieval style. The first thing I want to tell you about the period of the medieval period that we play in the SCA is that the vast majority of that time the world was going through a little ice age. And so when you see all those paintings of people with the long sleeves and the hats and the coats, it's because it was colder out. They were not getting the kind of heat that we get today. They also were largely done in Europe. There was more rain going on. And the weather patterns were different. And we have to keep that in mind. The other thing is that they lived a different lifestyle than we did. If you had never felt air conditioning, you probably wouldn't be jonesing after it. This is actually why I don't like having air conditioning in my home. Fans are fine to move the air around, but I avoid air conditioning when I can because it makes my body want to do other things. It makes me want to acclimate to the colder, and that's not what I live in. I live in New England, and it's warm right now, so that's the way it is. So there are lots of cool things you're going to note. We're going to start at the top and work our way down. You'll note on my head I have a veil. I look like the flying nun. It's all good. This is a linen veil. It is, let's see if I can show it to you here. It's fairly large. I put it on lengthwise. And because it is hot out today, I have wet it. We know that women in period wet their veils, especially their linen ones, not so often their silk ones. Why? Because we can tell in the pictures. I was reading a lovely article about this on JSTOR a couple of weeks ago, and I wish I had access to it again. They can show that how a veil in a painting sits on a woman's head and how it's pinned, and you'll note mine is not pinned at all, would tell whether it was wetted or not. When it is wet, it actually acts as a natural air conditioner for your head, and that's where most of your heat is stored. You know how Grandma always used to say, put a hat on when you're going out in the winter because you want to keep the heat in. Well, in the summer, it's the other way around. You want the cooling to happen. And so you wet your veils, you put them on top. That wets your coif. It keeps everything up here so much cooler. Despite the fact that it is probably about 95 degrees in this room right now, and I only have one window open and a fan going, I'm actually not feeling all that hot. I'm a bit moist, but I'm not sweating buckets, which is nice. Beneath my veil, I have my coif. My coif is very simple. It's just like a little Dutch cap style thing. It has long strings which wrap around my head. It goes underneath my bun. My hair goes up into a bun, and I wet my hair before I put the coif on. This helps cool my head. I put the coif on. I wet the coif. That helps cool my head. Coif is tied on. Hair is all secure underneath. The wet veil goes on top. And wow, what a difference. If you happen to be stuck in a house with no air conditioning and you're dying of heat, you want to wet down a towel or a piece of linen and put it on your head. You'll get the same general effect. It's wonderful. It's incredibly cooling. And if you happen to be at an event and you're out in the sun, this is blocking the rays of the sun from getting to your neck. So when I'm wearing this, the only thing that might burn is the tip of my nose. And I usually sunblock that because sunburn being period is, I don't care. I'm not that period. I love the fact that the veil keeps me cool, and I use it almost all the time. I will occasionally have a straw hat on top of all of this. It both helps keep the veils in place and keeps the sun off of my face so that my nose doesn't burn. My coif is tied tightly around my head, and it goes over the tips of my ears, which holds everything in place. It goes underneath the bun in the back, and as it's pressing along here, it works like a headband or a sweatband. It keeps the sweat from rolling down into your eyes, which is a wonderful thing, let me tell you. It's really helpful when you're outside and you're moving around a lot and you're sweating buckets. Last weekend, I was at Great Northeastern War. I loved the fact that I had my coif on. I didn't actually wear my veil. I just had the coif and hat, but it worked wonderfully. I kept everything from burning. It was great. Next thing I want to talk about is linen. So I use linen a lot. This happens to be a linen coif that I sewed. It is short sleeved, but as you can see, it's longer sleeved than my short sleeve dress. Usually, if I lived in England in the 14th century, I would wear linen onto my skin. I would wear a linen or wool dress and then a wool overdress. In pictures, though, during some periods in the 14th century, you will see women who are wearing just white shifts with a dress like this on top. And there was a period in there where the temperature was a lot warmer, and they had some summers that were in the 80s. And that allowed them to experience, they would roll up the sleeves of their shift. They didn't make short sleeved shifts for under their dresses. They would cover everything. So remember, they didn't have sunscreen. Linen is not a perfect sunscreen, but it does a fairly good job. I'm relatively prone to burning, and when I'm covered in linen, I do not burn. It's nice, and it breathes. Linen, being a natural fabric, allows it to breathe. Your skin breathes. It's also antimicrobial naturally. And so if you sweat a lot, like me, it soaks up the sweat. It keeps it off your dress, but it also keeps it away from you so you're not sort of soaking in your own sweat. You can wet down your chemise or sark or underdress, however you want to call it, and that helps keep you cool. And these are short. They come to about the knee, and you can either have them sleeveless or you can have them with short sleeves. I decided to go with a short sleeve this time because I am going to be, of course, at Massachusetts Ren Fair next weekend and the weekend after. It's August. It's hot. And so rather than wear multiple layers that were going to cause me to possibly heat stroke out, which is a bad thing, I decided to go with short sleeved layers that showed off what it would have looked like. And I will do a little roll in this to make it look more appropriate. But I wanted it to be a cooler outfit that was relatively period. This dress is not actually wool. I am not made of money at this point, unfortunately. Buy my books, by the way. If you buy my books, I can get more wool dresses. This is actually flannel, brushed cotton, which is a nice, slightly lighter than wool, but less breathable option, and it's a lot cheaper. You can get it on sale at Michael's and Joann's, sometimes for as little as $5 a yard. So you can make a bunch of dresses for $20, and it's rather nice. If it's really warm out, you can stick to all linen. If you're just wearing linen, you have an incredible amount of breathability. As you walk, it actually feels almost like you're in a bellows because things kind of go poof, poof, and you get air up underneath, and it's very cooling, surprisingly so. The first time I wore all linen layers, I thought I was going to be dying, and I wasn't. It was actually quite cool. And yet in the evening, when the temperature dropped and we had the chill come up, I was fine just with those layers because linen is both breathable and insulating. And so it's a very good thing to wear. Remember to eat things like fruit and drink lots of water. And if you can't drink water, because some people can't, and I understand that, there are times when my stomach will rebel if I try to drink water or I've drunk too much, look into something called switchel, shrub, or secangibin. And I'll put a recipe for all three of those in the comments below this afternoon. All three are vinegar-based, basically medieval Gatorades. Secangibin is the Viking version. Shrub is a kind of a later period. So it's kind of the end of SCA period, the beginning of the Civil War period. And switchel is medieval version of it. You mix vinegar and sugar, a little bit of salt, and fruit. And you stew it up until it becomes a syrup. And then you use a little bit of it in a big glass of water. And you end up with this nice, flavorful thing which acts like Gatorade on your body and provides you electrolyte balance. It's a fantastic thing. It tastes great. You know what's in it. It's not like you're feeding crap to your kids or yourself. And a little bit goes a long way. I made a quart jar a couple of years ago. I still have most of it, and we drink it a lot. So, and you can make it with any fruit. Usually you'll hear people use strawberries, blueberries, things like that. I made mine with plum because I happened to have a bunch of plums that were on the verge of going off, and I wanted to use them. It was a great use of them. The flavor it really came through, and everybody really enjoys it. So you can do whatever you want. And if you happen to be like me in the evenings when it's cooled off and you are sure you are hydrated and have eaten food and have taken care of yourself, you can also mix it in with a little bit of vodka, and it has a lovely tang to it. Anyway, this was my first of the medieval series of videos. I hope you enjoyed it. There are more to come. I'm in the process of writing a medieval reenactors cookbook, which I'm hoping many of you will look at. It's going to be a lot of fun. The book has a ton of recipes, but not just that. It also goes into how to cook things, both how to cook them at home, how to prep them at home so that they're easy to cook on site, and how to cook them from scratch on site over a fire. Because these are 3 different ways of making the same meal. And it's important to know all 3, because if you know all 3, you can make educated choices as to what will work best for you. When I go to SCA events, I tend to pre-cook a lot of things because I want to spend my time going to classes, doing heraldry, having fun with my friends. I don't want to spend hours cooking. But at a Renaissance fair, I'm doing my cooking as a display. And so spending the entire day cooking, as a kitchen wench would have done at the time, doesn't bother me in the least, and I rather enjoy it. And so I have included instructions for all of those different ways so that people can have fun and play around with it. And I talk about coals versus over at open fire or open flame, different basic foods. I've gone into pottage, because pottage was served at every table pretty much throughout the medieval period across the world. It's water, protein, carbs, and fats mixed together. You've got a bean or a split pea or a barley or something like that mixed with a bit of meat or fish, maybe some egg, and then whatever vegetables you have on hand. That's pottage. It can be sweet. It can be savory. You can serve it for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. You can have it as a snack. It's sort of the never-ending pot of stew that you might see on a 1950s stovetop, or my stovetop, because I do that. Anyway, the book is going to have a whole bunch of stuff in it that is really useful. Tips for how to bake on site, tips for how to do shortcuts so that you can do a display where you get to show all of the aspects of something without necessarily doing the 9-hour, prep and everything on site. There will be a handful of photos. It's going to be in black and white. The cover will be color, but the inside will be black and white. I think that it will be well received. I think it'll be a lot of fun. And I think that the recipes will lend themselves well to both the modern palate and to the medieval one. I'm really hoping that I will see some of those wonderful recipes that I've test done and which I have out with friends being test done on feast tables in the next year or so. Yay! So send me a picture of you in your medieval garb, because I want to see them. And don't forget, I think it's down here, but it could be up here. There's a subscribe button. So subscribe to me so you know when the next videos are coming out. And I love you guys, and I will see you on my regular author thing on Monday morning.